The African Union Executive Council meeting has begun at the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
And African ministers of foreign affairs will for 2 days deliberate on possible agenda items that the heads of state and government should deliberate on when they meet later on the 5th and the 6th of February. Now, SABC correspondent Coletta Wanjohi spoke to Dr. Naledi Pandor, South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, who is in Addis Ababa for the meeting.
We are, as ministers, keen to assess whether previous decisions that have been made have been acted upon by the Commission. And in particular, you would recall that in 2020 we adopted the African Continental Free Trade Area. And of course, as countries, we'd like to have a measure of the progress we're making with implementation of this very important trade and economic development instrument for the African continent. Thirdly, we're concerned about matters of peace and security. We believe we need to look at the architecture of support for the achievement of peace and security on the African continent. And it's important, given events that have unfolded over the last year, that we do an assessment of where we are as Africa with respect to entrenching peace and security.
So, Honourable, on the issue of peace and security, we are seeing an increased level of instability. Look at West Africa, we're seeing unconstitutional changes of government. In the Horn of Africa, protracted conflict. Where is the African Union going wrong?
Well, I think that as the African Union, there may be a need for a fairly concentrated assessment of whether we reacted as we should to the threat of terrorism in West Africa. Because I think those incursions and the damage that has been wrought by these extremist forces has caused massive instability in a number of African countries. And we haven't sufficiently built the machinery that allows us to respond to defend countries against terrorist groups or groups that intend to cause instability and harm on the continent. So this is why I'm saying that the peace and security architecture question is a particularly important one. Another aspect is a concern at the manner in which the ordinary public has responded to military coups, that in some countries it appears they've welcomed this takeover by the military, which is essentially undemocratic, against the constitutions of the countries in which we've had such occurrences. That means the African Union must try to understand what is it that causes the disaffection between elected governments and the citizens of some of the countries on the continent. Are we doing enough in terms of ensuring good governance, the enjoyment of human rights, opportunities for socio-economic development? All of these are within the ambit of responsibility in terms of promotion and achievement in the statutes of the African Union. And we've built a number of institutions that have a responsibility to promote these particular aspects that I have referred to. So a moment of deep reflection, I think, has come because the last 18 months have been a very worrying period for us. And we have to understand what is actually going on and how do we develop an ability to react more speedily and to act more effectively.
We also have this year the new membership, especially of the African Union Peace and Security Council. We're going to have new members. Do you think the new membership should trigger a new dynamic within the African Union in terms of guiding the continent towards peace and security?
Well, the PSC was established to be the heart of ensuring sustainability of peace and security on the continent. So yes, certainly we must examine that body and look at whether we can assist it to be more impactful. I think we've made progress in that we do have a peace fund established through resources of member states. Let's look at whether we can make utilization of the peace fund more appropriately directed toward those issues that cause concern. We have the APRM, the review process. Should we be using the APRM to support good governance practices? We've got Auda Nepad, whose remit is to support development initiatives and provide appropriate foundational support for countries as they pursue Agenda 2063. So have we really created a partnership that would be active in supporting and enhancing development? So for me, we're now 20 years or so down the line in the existence of the African Union. We've got a lot of development challenges on the continent. We shouldn't be comfortable and rest on our laurels that we've existed for 2 decades. I think we've got to really begin to assess our impact and reflect on how we can do even better.
The COVID pandemic is still with us, even as the African Union heads of state prepare to meet. And do you think the African continent is so lenient or needs a stronger voice in terms of projecting the need for fairness, be it in vaccine acquisition, production of vaccines within the continent, and also the issue of travel bans? I mean, should we be having that just different countries imposing sudden travel bans against our countries, and yet this is a global issue?
As Africans, we tend to be very kind. There's no reciprocity. I mean, the infection levels in countries in the West have been far higher than our infection levels on the African continent. But we've been reticent about imposing bans because we realize that this harms our economies, people-to-people engagement, and particularly important sectors for our economies such as tourism. But I think we can become more robust. I also think our leaders have been very clear that they want to develop our research and innovation ability and ensure we are not last in line with respect to access to vaccines. And so ensuring that we strengthen the role of the African Centers for Disease Control is an important imperative, and our leadership, our heads of state, have clearly articulated their view on this. I think the key issue now is access to vaccines for everyone so that we develop population immunity on the continent. So I think what we should be discussing, hopefully the heads of state will discuss, is how we strengthen our articulation of the need for greater support for the economic recovery plans of countries on the African continent. We have spoken to the matter of debt relief, a pause on interest payments with respect to debt. We've spoken about special drawing rights under the remit of the International Monetary Fund. Many of these aspects have been agreed to, but we're not seeing the practical action associated with them. And if we continue with the level of economic decline that has been apparent in the time of the COVID-19 pandemic, I think this poses an increased threat on stability in Africa. So economic recovery, creation of greater employment opportunities, more business formation, increased trade under the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. So all of these form part of the agenda that we must pursue. Linked to it, of course, is stronger and more outcome-oriented deliberations with our partners throughout the world. As we talk to Europe, as we talk to America, as we talk to China, and all other powers in the world, we should be saying, assist us in this particular area, because economic recovery is so central to everything that we need to achieve.
The African Union is still divided on the issue of Israel getting an observer status in the AU.
Well, as South Africa, we're resolute on our view that the decision that was taken without consultation, and it's a very important issue for the African continent, because from the time of the Organization of African Unity, as Africa, we've always been supportive of struggles for freedom, and we've always stood with those who are striving to enjoy their self-determination and sovereignty. And so the people of Palestine's cause is an African cause. And we can't appear by our decisions to desert the people of Palestine and have, as party to the African Union, a country that is imposing real abuse of international human rights practices against the people of Palestine, and in fact infringes the very charter of the African Union. So I think on those grounds, just basic, our own protocols, our own support for human rights, the framework of our own statute that created us, Israel doesn't fit into becoming an observer in our organization. So this is something we believe must actually be reversed.